All right, so we will go ahead and get started here. I think most people have gotten into the webinar now, so we'll go ahead and get started. We have a lot to cover today. There's a lot to show in the financial report writer that we're going to be covering. So we're going to dive right on in here. We have just a quick presentation up front. It's a very quick presentation because, like I said, this is going to be very demo heavy. We're showing you guys a lot of stuff in the report writer. So we'll just kind of jump right in here. Some quick introductions on the call here. My name is Joe Gupster. I think I know a lot of the people on the call here, but just introduce myself real quick for the ones I don't know. So my name is Joe Gupster. I'm the partner at Martin and Associates in our Sage software division, and there's my contact information there. And also on the call with me is Brett Penzinger, who is the director of our Sage software division, and there's his contact information. And then in the back end running it is Betsy Frank from our office as well. So she will be looking for any questions that you guys might send in as we're kind of moving along here. So a quick agenda, speaking of questions, some housekeeping notes we'll kind of go over. So we'll just talk about this real quick. So on housekeeping, the webinar is being recorded. And then once the webinar is finished and the webinar has been posted out to our website, you will receive an email with the link to the webinar as part of signing up for the webinar. So if you want to go back and watch anything later, if you didn't get a chance to kind of sit through the webinar right now, want to watch it later, you can. If you want to forward it to anyone else in your office that you think might benefit from it, by all means, go ahead and forward that on. So quick housekeeping there. If you have any questions that you want to ask, drop them in the Q&A section or in the chat, and Betsy will be monitoring that, and we will look at any questions we have got throughout the presentation and address them and talk about them further at the end. The rest of the agenda, moving on, is we'll give a quick introduction to Martin and Associates and a quick introduction to Sage Intacct. Again, real quick introduction to both of them there. We're going to talk about the reporting options that are available in Sage Intacct. And then we're going to dive into and look at the actual financial report writer and go through each of the tabs on the report writer and talk about them in more detail. So the rows, the columns, the filters, the format, all the way down through there, setting the permissions. So we're going to cover all that as part of the class as well. Here's just a real quick background about Martin and Associates. In a nutshell, we were founded in 1988. We've been a Sage partner since 1988. We have 26 employees that work at Martin and Associates with various backgrounds between financial, programming, technical, server related. We concentrate on ERP products and all the corresponding add-on products that go with that. So specifically on the ERP side, we deal with Sage Intacct, Sage 100, Sage 500, Acumatica. So those are the main ERPs we deal with. So this is kind of what we do on a day-to-day basis. Real quick, some quick things about Sage Intacct here. So Sage Intacct is a born in the cloud solution. So it's not an on-premise solution. It's a hosted out in the cloud on Sage's, servers that Sage kind of has out there. Very reliable. They have a 98 or 99.8% uptime commitment, and they do automatic backups for you. It is a web-based interface. So you're going to see that as I get in here. So with it being a web-based interface, it's got a more of a fresh and modern kind of look and feel to it. And because of it being a web browser interface, you can pretty much access your financial system from anywhere at any time, as long as you have an internet connection and a web browser. So whether that's from your laptop, your desktop, a phone, a tablet, whatever, you'll be able to access your data. And the screens will kind of format accordingly based on if you're on a smaller display, but you can pretty much hit it from anywhere at any time. Some of the things that are going to apply today we're going to talk about is some of this dimensional accounting. And we're going to talk a little bit about dashboards and how you can put your financial reports on there. Some big things on here as well. Automatic upgrades happen. So for people that are on more legacy systems right now, whenever you want to upgrade your system, we got to schedule an upgrade, and we got to go through the process of upgrading your system. People have to be out. We got to convert your data, all that kind of stuff. With Sage Intacct, The upgrades happen automatically. They have 4 new releases a year. You'll know when they're going to happen, but that night you'll go home and come in next morning and you'll be on the newest version of Sage Intacct when you log in, and your data will be ready to go. So Intacct was designed for your finance team, so CFOs, everybody dealing with your accounting data. And a big thing with Sage Intacct is it was the first and only preferred financial management system recommended by the AICPA, and that's still the case to this day. Here's just a quick little timeline about Sage Intacct. The thing I like to point out about this is, Intacct was founded in 1999, and it was kind of moving along. It got its AICPA endorsement in 2009. 2017 is when it went from Intacct to Sage Intacct, because that's when Sage purchased the product. And then from 2017 on, Sage has been putting a lot of their development efforts into Sage Intacct, and you've seen a lot of good things, getting built into their product, and a lot of new features, and kind of just really beefing up the product over the last 8 years or so that Sage has now owned it. It's always ranked really high in customer satisfaction year after year. And then we're going to look at this last slide here. So what are the different reporting options available inside of Sage Intacct? So, Intacct gives you a variety of report options that are available in the product. There are 3 different types of reports within inside of Sage Intacct. You have standard reports, and these are the reports that are built into the system, and they're pre-configured. You can't change those reports, but you do have the ability to change some of the filtering on the reports. So you can, pick certain ranges of data you want to see, certain time periods you want to see. So that's standard reports. There are financial reports, and there are a number of financial reports that kind of come with Sage Intacct as part of the Quick Start library that you can access right out of the box and start running financial reports right away. Using the financial report writer, which is what we're getting ready to dive right into here in a minute, you can modify these existing reports and or create new reports as well. So these are dealing with financial specific reports. So your general ledger data, P&L, balance sheets, statement of cash flows, trial balance reports, things of that nature. Then you also have the ability to go in custom reports as well. And there are 2 custom report writers that come with or are available with Sage Intacct. There is the custom report writer, or what they refer to as a CRW. That is a report writer that's included with your core Sage Intacct subscription, and it's a wizard-based tool that'll walk you through, step by step of creating your reports. If you want to get more in depth and do some, more complex type reports, you can do an add-on subscription to the interactive custom report writer, or what they call the ICRW. And as I mentioned, add-on report writer gives you the ability to do more advanced type reporting with your transactional data. These custom reports are more non-financial in nature. So, reports dealing with your customer data, your accounts payable data, purchase orders, sales orders, inventory, all that kind of stuff is more of what you'll have on these custom report writers. Okay, so that's it. Like I said, it was a quick PowerPoint presentation. We're going to dive right into Sage Intacct now. So let me go ahead and bring up Sage Intacct. And we're going to start off right away and just dive right into the report writer. So the way you access the financial report writer, there's a couple ways you can get into it. I can go to reports, all, and then I can go to core, and I can go to financial reports right here, or I can go general ledger, all, financial reporting, and I can go to financial reports right here. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that to take me into the financial report writer. When I come into the financial report writer, I see all the reports that are out there currently, either ones that came with the system or ones that were created by somebody. Right from here, I have the ability of saying add if I wanted to start from scratch and start creating a new report right from scratch. I'm going to cancel out of that because I don't have time to kind of walk through creating a whole new report. So I'm going to bring a couple reports up here as I'm explaining all these features as we go. Here's the quick start library we talked about, where you can financial reports that kind of are built into Intacct into your library right from there. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go to this balance sheet detail report, and I'm going to click on the edit tab next to that. And we're going to talk about the report writer now. So we are in the financial report writer right now. Okay, and you'll notice there are a series of tabs down the left-hand side, and we're currently sitting in the report info tab. On the report info tab is where you give it the name of the report. And this is the name that's actually going to show in the financial report list that we just came from, as well as being part of the report header when you actually run your report out to HTML, Excel, PDF, whatever. You can also pick what report type this is and who the report audience is, who this is intended for, basically, okay? So you have different options you can pick from here, and you control these. They don't really do anything other than it helps you when you go to find reports later. So let me show you what I'm talking about. I'm going to launch a second tab here, and I'm going to go back into the financial report list here. But here's where it comes into play. Here's the owner, here's the report type, and here's the report audience, where I can start filtering these down and saying, show me all, financial statement reports, and it'll start filtering down for me anything where I picked financial statement in the report type. And I can do the same thing on the audience and the owner. Okay, so that's all driven through here. We'll talk about the owner here in a little bit and where that comes into play and what that means, but just remember when we get to that, you can select by that when you're trying to find your reports. Here's where you say if a report is active or not. If it's not active, it won't show up for people to run. It's kind of more in development stage, so it doesn't include it on the menus and in the lists and stuff like that. The only way you'll see it is when you're on this list here, you have to say include inactive, and that will make the inactive ones show up. But by default, they don't show up because it assumed it's not an active report. The report structure. This is where you determine how you're going to write the report. Is it based on your accounts, or is it based on your dimensions / your sub-account type data? Okay. You cannot change the report structure once you pick it. So notice I can't change this over from accounts to dimensions because it's already been locked in. If you want to change it, you have to create a new report and then kind of start creating that report using accounts or dimensions, whichever one you don't have selected by default. As you're making changes, you can do your save up here. That'll just save the changes you're making and keep you right in the report writer. Save and done will save your changes and close you out of the report. Duplicate is a good tab, something you should use. If you're making changes to a report or you're creating a new report off of an existing report, you can click on this duplicate tab. And what that does is it makes a copy of this report, and it'll ask you, what is the new name for the report? And you give it the new name. And now you're modifying that duplicate copy, not the, in this case, balance sheet detail report. You're modifying a copy of that you gave it a new name. Okay, so good thing to use there is the duplicate tab or the duplicate button. So let's move on. Let's go look at the rows tab here. The rows tab is this screen's similar whether you pick accounts or dimensions right here. So it's similar in terms of the setup, but we're going to look at it with it being for accounts, obviously. Each row on this tab will represent a row on your report, and there are 4 columns of data that are out here. There's the row structure, and this is where you put in the headings that you see down the left-hand side of the report in the most basic sense, right? It's what you see as the description for all your rows that go down the left-hand side of your report. Your detail level is where you tell it what type of detail is it. Is it a detail report where it shows all accounts? Is it a summary where it hides the accounts? Okay. Basis. Is this a period? Is it cumulative? Is there a percentage for that row? So you control all that through the basis column here. And then you have an always display. So if you check, so this comes into play where if you have a line that has a zero balance, so like cash and equivalents or short-term investments or allowance for doubtful accounts, by default, that'll always display as not checked. So if that line is a zero balance line on the report, it will not show that line by default. If you always want a line to show whether or not it has data in it or not, so whether it zeros or has a balance, that's where this always display comes into play. And on each of those lines that you always want to make sure show up, you check that always display checkbox on that line. Okay. If you ever have questions about what a certain field is or column is inside of the report writer, whenever you see a question mark here, it'll take you down or pop up help for that particular value or field or whatever you're on and give you some more information about that what you're looking at on that question mark. So it gives you more information about the detail level and what it all means right there. Okay. If you want to know what a report's going to look like as you're writing it, there's this preview, and then you can say preview live report HTML, and it'll pop up to HTML and show you what your report is going to look like as you're, as you're creating the report. It's a good way to kind of look and see everything. You'll notice that underneath of my assets, current assets, cash and equivalents, I see my individual accounts right here. And the reason that is because underneath the cash and equivalents, notice the detail level was set to detail show accounts. If I set this to summary, hide accounts, and say OK, and then preview this again, you're going to see my report's going to refresh. And notice that cash and equivalents now does not show the detail. It just shows cash and equivalents and gives me a total because I hid the detail. I can still see it on the preview if I really want to look at it by clicking on this button here to expand it. So it's still there for me to look at, but whenever I print the report out to Excel or to PDF or whatever, that detail will not show. And by default, when the preview comes up, it will not show either. Okay, so just wanted to kind of point out how that works and the difference between the summary and the detail there. So that's kind of what that looks like. Okay. I can go in here. If I pick summary, let me go back to summary for a second. And I want to say expand by dimensions, and I want to expand this by department. So this is one of my dimensions, which are kind of the equivalent or your sub accounts in your reports or in your chart of accounts. And let me preview this again. And you're going to see cash and equivalents, and it starts showing me any cash account where I tag transactions to certain departments. So this amount was tagged for 300, 200 operations, 100 sales, and there was negative 20 million that did not have any department tagged on it. So that's where you start getting into play with your summary, but you want to look at by departments, and there's different summaries here you can do with all levels with the roll up, all levels with individual balance on down the line. Okay, so I just wanted to show you how there's more detail you can get into even with your summary, where you can start doing some breakdowns by your dimensions out there. So the dimensions, let me go in here real quick. If I go into reports, setup, here's all my dimensions. So I did it by departments. So here's my department one right here. So here's my sales, operations, admin, marketing, IT on down the line. And that's what I see here. Admin, operations, sales, all coming from my departments right here. And transactions that were tagged with the cash account having that dimension being tagged. Okay. If I want to see all of them, even with, if they have a zero balance, I pick this one here. And then when I preview, it's going to be the similar where I see, oh, not the right one here. Okay. So that will start changing as you pick different things on this. And I should go, let me do this one real quick. Say okay. And let me preview that one. Yeah, see how the one with no departments goes away because I have that checked right there. Because I picked a different one. So the no department went away. So these will start giving you different data based on what you pick right here. I want to put that back to detail though and say, okay. So you just go down and you write your reports. If you don't have anything, like it's just the heading. So here's my current assets, right? And then boom, it's right here. It's just a heading called current assets. And then here's my cash and cash equivalents. Now, when I go into the detail of one of these are all done by account groups. So if I go to cash and cash equivalents and go to view, I am looking at the account group for cash and cash equivalents. And you'll see it's got some setup I can do here. I can edit this, okay? And when I'm inside of this right here, I have the ability to kind of do some setup stuff here. The name is the name of how it will show up on an account group list. This is how it's going to show up on the report when it shows up by default, and this is how it's going to show up on the total by default. You give it a normal balance. Is it a debit or a credit? And then you pick your structure type, and this can either be a category, which then ties to your quick start categories that get assigned to your GL accounts, and you can start picking different categories out there. So that starts showing you what accounts roll up into that. So let me go a little bit further here and let me go into general ledger accounts, and I'm going to go into my checking account one and edit this. Every account will get a quick start category assigned to it. There's a whole list of them here. So all the cash ones get assigned to a quick start category of cash and cash equivalents. So when I am in my account groups that we were just looking at, which I can also access by going all, and do it a couple ways. I can go all, general ledger. I can go setup, and then I can go into, no, not there. I can go here and I can go into my financial report structures and go into my account groups here. So I'm going to go into it that way. This shows me all my account groups out here. So if I look for my cash and cash equivalents one that we were just looking at and edit that, that's what we were in before. So you'll see cash and cash equivalents or any quick start category where it's cash and cash equivalents set. And here's the example of a cash account that's going to the cash and cash equivalents quick start category. The benefit of doing it that way is as you add new reports to or as you add new accounts to your general ledger, you know your financial reports are going to pick them up automatically because they are assigned to account categories that are assigned to account groups, and your account groups are what you're using on your report. So all that information is picked up automatically without worrying about adding that individual account to your report. Okay. On the account groups here, this is just a one-to-one relationship here. But let me go to look at, notice underneath of current assets, it's got all these accounts underneath of it. So let me go out to account groups and find my current assets. And let me edit that one. And you'll see my current assets is made up of more account groups. So it's made up of the account groups of cash and cash equivalents, short-term investments, inventory, intercompany receivables, all the way down through other current assets. So that kind of corresponds to what I see underneath of my other assets, or my current assets right here. Okay, showing you how all that ties together. When I am back on this screen here, and I'm looking at my account groups, if I want to know what it's going to look like on a report, I can click on this hierarchy button right here, or the hierarchy link, and it shows me how it's going to kind of look on the report. So here's current assets, and here's cash and cash equivalents, short-term investments, allowance, or accounts receivable, net of allowance, on down the line. And it will show me all the accounts based on the categories that fall underneath of each of those. So a quick way to kind of look how your report's going to look and what accounts are being grabbed based on your quick start categories and what account groups they're assigned to. Okay. So I wanted to touch base on the account groups there a little bit. And then, as I mentioned, they're coming into play as we are running our reports right here. As I was looking at right there, takes me in and shows me the setup of that particular account group. Let's move on to columns. So I'm going to click on columns here and jump into my columns part of the report writer. So the columns, this is where you select all the individual columns that are going to show up on your report. Okay. Usually the first column is going to be your account number and name column, and that's going to be where it displays your descriptive data down the left-hand side. So where it displays this information: assets, current assets, cash and cash equivalents, on down the line. Okay. So that's what this usually is dealing with. And what you do here is you tell it what type of data are you looking at. Is it account name only? Is it the account number and name? Is it account number only? So that determines when you see your accounts here, this is showing the account number and the name because it was picked to be account number and name right here. Okay. And then you have column headings that you can show on these reports, all determined through there. So it's going to show you the period name, the period date. So I see here's month ending and here's the date based on the settings I have on my columns right here. All right. If I go down and I can hide, well, we'll get to that here on the numbers here in a second. Let's move over to an actual column here. So this is where it's going to show the actual data. So actual means it's numbers coming from your financial. And it can be whatever period you tell it. So is it current month data? Is it prior month data? Is it current quarter data? Next year data, current year data. So you pick that on the reporting period. Then this offset comes into play, and I'm saying 0 for the first one. So that means it's being driven by the date selected for the report. So this is as of 12/31/2018. So based on the setup of this column, it is 12/1/2018 through 12/31/2018. And then what data goes above it and how it's going to show. And then I can get down into this conditional reporting where I can start doing conditional highlighting and edit these rules and start saying, if a number is greater than a certain dollar amount, I want it to be green. Or if it's less than a certain dollar amount, I want it to be red. I can start doing different coloring on my report if I want things to stand out based on conditional formatting that I set up based on the number that's on that particular column. Okay. And then whenever I go to print that report, it will basically, if I print it out to like a PDF or something like that, that coloring will kind of go along with it as I do it. You'll see that coloring show up. Let's see. Down here, let me go ahead and turn this back off. Hide column. Hide column is used where if you're using a column of data in a calculation, but you don't want that individual column to show, you want the results of your calculations to show, that's where you say hide column. So the column of data is there to be used on the report. It can be used in calculations, but this individual column won't show. It's just being used in other columns farther down the report for calculations, basically. Okay. Going back up here to this offset. So what this report is showing is this report is intended to show you current period data and then one period back, 2 periods back. So that's why it's showing 12/1/2018 through 12/31/2018. And these are showing November and these are showing October because of the 1 period back, 2 periods back. Okay, so that report now is flexible enough to where if I run this again, let this refresh. Notice I see 12/31, 11/30, 10/31. I'm going to come in here and say, run this report as of November 2018. Okay, and I'm going to preview this again. And watch these numbers will just change. So now it's November 2018, October 2018, September 2018. So that's how you can, dynamically have your columns changed based on how you set these columns up. So if you always do like a rolling 12 or something like that, you could have 12 columns across there and just have -1, -2, -3 all the way back, and it'll roll accordingly for you and always show a rolling 12, for instance. Okay. So that's all of setting up your actual columns here. Let's see. If you you can move these columns, so I can go add a new column to the left, add a new column to the right, or I can move the column left, move the column right. I can delete a column if I wanted to. So that's all different ways of creating a report. I'm going to close out of this preview. I'm actually going to go into another report here real quick. I'm going to show you a dimensional type report. So let me go into financial reports, and I want to go into the edit profit and loss by department. So let me go into here, profit and loss by department, and I'm going to go to the columns of this one. And notice with one column right here, because I said expand by, and I'm showing now I can pick what dimensions I want to expand by. So I'm going to say expand by the departments, and I can say show all departments with a roll up. Okay, so I have one column on this report of data, right? But let me preview this report, and you're going to see I get data for each of my departments out there. So real quick way of just one column of getting departmentalized data for all my dimensions of the departments, and then I get a roll up of all these at the end, just by putting one column on the report and saying expand by departments and rolling up. Okay. So that's all with your departments there. I wanted to point that out real quick. And again, we looked at where the departments were coming from earlier out in the dimensions. So we'll leave that out there. Okay, so let's move on. We're going to move on to the computations tab. So let me go into the computations tab here. So the computations tab comes into play if you're going to do calculations on your report. So let me show you one for an example. Let me go out here and find one that has it. I want to find the percentage of revenue type report. So here's a profit and loss percentage of revenue. And I'm going to edit this report. Computations. Notice this has multiple computations on the report. So for my P&L percentage of revenue report, I'm showing my net income loss, all these individual rows, and the computation one is I'm dividing each of these rows by my revenue. Okay, so here's my revenue, which is my total revenue. It's dividing all these individual elements of my report and showing me what percentage of revenue each revenue makes up, and what percentage each cost makes up, and what percentage your net income loss makes up. Okay, that's computation one. And then computation two is multiplying it by 100 so that it masks it right. So how do those get used now in my columns? Well, let me show you here. Here is a computation column. And on this computation, it's saying use computation one and base it on column 2 data. So that gets me my divide by the revenue column. Notice I'm hiding this, though. That just gets me the calculation, but I got to mask it right. So notice how this is a hidden column, because on my next column, which is also a computation, and it's using computation 2, which is where it takes it times the 100, and it's using column 3 for the calculation, taking what it got as the results of that calculation, taking it times 100, and that's where it's showing to get my percentage. So let's look at how that shows. So here's where I get my data, and here's my calculation that I just did. So revenue products is made up of 99.9% of total revenue, Intercompany sales is made up of 0.1%, all the way down through my net income or loss. Okay, so that is the some additional stuff with the computations and the calculations if you have a report that has computations and calculations in it. All right, so I'm going to move on here, and I'm going to move to the next tab, and I'm going to move to the filters tab. So on the filters tab, this is where you define things like what is the report being run as of. Do you want to do filtering by your dimensions out there? So department, location, channel, customer, vendor, employee, item, job, warehouse, all dimensions that are available on your reports. If you are, own the modules that have these dimensions and you have them set up and you're using them. So include subdimension means does it include them or not? And you can pick which ones. I can say a specific department or department group, where a department is one individual department, and a department group is where you can group your departments or your dimensions together into groups and include multiple values of a dimension underneath of a group. Okay. And I can say to prompt. So when I go to run this report, do I want to be prompted? Same thing with my date. When I go to run this report, do I want to be prompted? Okay. If you put a date here, then whenever you run the report, it's going to use this date as the date it defaults to when the report runs. Okay. If you leave this blank, it's always going to default to the day that you run the report for what date the report's going to run as of. Okay. I'm going to leave this as 12/31/2018 just because that's the data that's sitting out here in this demo data. Is there's a lot more data sitting out there at the end of 2018. So that's why I use that date. To show you how this works, let me actually go out here to my financial reports again. And I'm going to go to that same report we've been looking at, balance sheet detail. And I'm going to say, run this out to HTML. So I'm not editing the report. I'm just saying, run this report. And notice I get prompted with my reporting method, my as of date, asking me for a department and asking me for a location. And the reason it is because I said prompt for the date, prompt for the reporting book, prompt for department, prompt for location. I did not say prompt for any of these other ones down here, so I'm not being prompted for those dimensions, only the ones that I said to be prompt. So if I want to look at a specific, just for sales for all locations, I can run that, and it's going to filter that out, and I'm only looking at this report now for the department called sales because of the selection criteria I picked. Okay? So that is your filters tab here and what all you do inside of that. Let's move on. I want to move on to my format tab. So on my format tab, this is where you tell it things like, how do you want your numbers to show for negatives? Do you want negative numbers to show with a different color? And that's if you're going out to PDF only. Are you doing any rounding? Are you putting a currency symbol? And if so, is it floating next to the number or is it always aligned left? And then how do I want my zeros to display? So right now I have display a dash for zeros. So when I go and preview this report, okay, let's get out of that. And let me cancel this for a second. And let me come back into it because it still has my filters kind of set there. I want to go to my format. I have this set to display a dash for 0, so I'm going to say preview that. Let me get into a report here that I know should have some zeros. Let me get into P&L by department. Let me preview this one here. Yeah, see how these have dashes now right here? That's because out here in my format, I'm saying for display a dash for zeros. If I want to look at, if I want to show a 0, out there, I could turn these various things on, and when I go to preview this, instead of being dashes, I can start seeing some. I gotta take that one off first. See, I start seeing zeros instead of dashes. Just showing you different ways of how the formatting here will control how your report's going to look. So if I want a currency symbol, if I want to show negatives is red, all this stuff. How do I want to show negative numbers? All would be determined by that, and they'll start showing out here accordingly. And you can preview right away to see those changes. But there's just the example of how my zeros show as zeros, not dashes now. Just a matter of preference how you want to set your report up. I'm going to get out of that report and leave that. The formatting is made up of different tabs. That's the general one. Also, when it shows like departments or locations, do I want to see the name only, the ID only, or the name in the ID? So if I do go back to my other report that I was in, let me do this here real quick. Let me go into my financial reports again, and I want to pick my by department again. And I want to preview this first and see how I'm seeing by departments, just admin, IT, marketing, operations, sales. Well, if I come into my format, I can say, that's because I'm saying show name only for my departments. If I said show ID, name and ID in previewed, notice where it's going to put the actual value of what admin is. So it's 300 ahead of it. And you'll see 500 is IT, 400 is marketing on down the line. Okay. The page setup and columns, this is where you give it, am I including a logo on the report? Okay. So, that one doesn't have a logo. This one, I might have a logo when I go to run it. So do I want the logo or not? Titles, what's going to show on my report, here's the title right here, profit and loss by department. That's coming from right here. I can have subtotals that would display underneath of that title, and it would display in a little bit smaller font than what the report title does. I can align my titles left, right, center, based on what I pick here. I can put page footer information. If I type something in here, that's static text that will print. Internal use only, something along the lines of that. I can check the box to say, show me if I'm running a report and it has filters on it, or I was prompt for data when I ran the report, I can say show filters, what was selected on the filters tab and the prompt selections. Do I want my footers to be left, center, or right justified? I can include page numbers and page date or report dates and report times when I run the reports as well. So when I actually go and print these reports, I can actually see down bottom, here's the print date, the print time, the page number, here's my logo, all because of the way I set that, page up to be run. So that's where you start seeing these things show up. Here's my report title. Okay. So that's all being driven by the page setup and columns underneath the formatting. And then lastly, I get into my rows and totals part of this. And this is where you start doing things like, are you going to put underlines underneath totals before you see the total? Are you going to hide or show the detail? Yes or no, the currency symbol on that. So you're controlling the formatting of your headings and your underlines, and do you want the headers to be centered or not? Are you centering the header above this? Are you putting blank lines in there? Are you doing page breaks? You can get in here and say page breaks. If after like my gross profit, I wanted a page break before my cost of revenue, I could check this and say do a page break after this. And then so my cost of revenue would start on another page because of the page breaks. So that's all things that are controlled on the final tab of the format here, the rows and totals. Okay, moving along here so we can get through the rest of this. On the notifications tab, this is just really where you can kind of come in and say add notifications, and you can give it notifications. It's kind of informational like notes where you're kind of clarifying something or adding information about rows on a report. So if you want, when your auditors look at a report, you want them to see certain, notes about what's going on with certain rows or whatever. You could turn on the notations and add them. If your CFO is looking at the report and you want to have certain things being noted on the financial report, you use these notations to kind of set those up and turn those on. Okay. So that's what notations are used for. And I'm going to go ahead and delete that notation because I don't want to keep it out there. All right, so I want to move on to my permissions tab. So this is important here, my permissions tab. So the permissions tab, you assign a couple things. Who is the report owner? And that really doesn't do anything other than when people are looking at this report, they know who the main person is who wrote this report or who maintains this report. So they know who to go to if they have questions. If they want to change something, if they want to add something, they know to go to Emma. And I will see that, I pointed this out earlier, but on the list of your reports, here's the owner right here, and that's pulling that from this data right here. Okay. Also on the permissions tab is where you determine who gets into the report or can see the report and who cannot. Okay, so the access list is who can see the report. So you're whitelisting people basically using that term. The exclusion tab is where you blacklist or block people or groups from seeing a report. Okay, so if on this example, if I'm saying give everybody access to it, I can then come in here and say add and say, I want to block Bill Approver from being able to see this report. I pick Bill Approver and say add, and that now blocks Bill Approver from seeing that report. So what the blocking will do is it will block who can see that report on the menus. If it's on a dashboard they have access to, it will not show it if they're logged in as them. Any place where that report's at, they will not be able to run the report or see the report if you have them on the exclusion list here. Okay. So the access and the exclusions kind of work hand in hand together out there. I want to go ahead and remove Bill Approver though. Let's move to the last tab here, and that's the next steps tab. So I'm on the next steps tab, and this is where you say if the report is active or not. Again, going back to my list of reports, only reports that are flagged as active show on the list of reports to run by default. Okay. If I am working on a report, typically I would flag this report to be inactive or not active, basically, while I was writing the report. So that way it didn't show up on the list by default and people run it and it's not ready for prime time yet. So I just make it be inactive. And then by default, they will not see that when they go to run reports. However, you can click on this include inactive reports, and that will show you reports that are not active out there so that that's how you would find the report when you're going out to work on it. So here's the status will now show up on the right-hand side because I turned on to show inactive ones. So now it's going to show me whether a report is active or inactive in that column because I turned on to show inactive ones. And that's how I would go through and find my reports that I'm working on. So that's one thing on the next steps tab. Also on here is you have the ability of right from here, adding this report to your my favorites. So out underneath here, here's your favorites. You could add it right there. Okay. You can add it to a dashboard. We'll talk about dashboards really briefly here in a minute, but you can add financial reports to a dashboard, either on the dashboard or through this right here. You can, if you want this report to run every so often on a schedule, you can set up a schedule for that report right here. And then you can include, if you create report groups where certain reports all get grouped together, you can include that on a group right there. Okay, so that's walking through all of the steps of the report writer there. I know it's a lot of data, but I wanted to kind of get through it all to show you guys what you have the ability of doing with the built-in financial report writer in Sage Intacct. Let me do one last thing here is underneath the dashboards, I'm going to go into my role-based one and I'm going to run the controller dashboard. And here's the example. These are financial reports right here. Profit and loss, actual versus budget, expense summary by department. So these are just actual financial reports. I would find them underneath my list of reports out here. So if I come out here and go on this list right here, okay, I'm looking for profit and loss, actual versus budget. It's going to be right here, profit and loss, actual versus budget. That is the report right here on this dashboard. Okay, so if I make changes to it here, it's going to reflect here. I also can edit a report right from a dashboard by clicking on this right here. And notice it will launch the financial report writer. And I'm in the same screens we just walked through, but on that report that I looked at right from the dashboard out there. So that's just showing you an example of where a report is on a dashboard. You can add reports. So when you go out here and you're creating dashboards or you're modifying dashboards, you can say add a component. And you come down through here and you say add a report. And it's a financial report because that's the ones we're dealing with here, right? Financial report. And then you start picking the report that's out there and you just add it right to your menu. Okay. So that's how you can add the reports to your dashboards. So that's the main part of what all I wanted to cover today. I guess let me jump back into here for one brief second. Let me finish what we have here. We got a couple of things. So we're going to talk about questions and answers here in a minute. But before we do that, here's our upcoming Sage Intacct webinars. So the next one that we have scheduled is coming up on February 27th at 11. And it's going to cover the Sage Intacct inventory control with automation. So it's going to get into the inventory module, the order entry module, the purchasing module. So that's what we're going to, and then the automation and the barcoding and the scanning available in the system. So that's coming up on February 27th. Note that the time is 11 because the people that have attended the webinars in the past, they're typically around 1, but that was going to go at 11. And then the next one is currently slated for March 20th, but we haven't 100% locked that in yet. So that'll be locked in here in the next few days. So just plan on the next one being around the 20th. And by the time we do the Intacct inventory control one, we'll have that locked in for sure. And then probably the one after that as well. We usually like to keep a couple out there in the future just to keep, kind of showing people information that's out there and training them on how to do things. So I guess we'll turn it over to Betsy. Was there any questions that came in during the presentation?
We have a couple, but if anyone else wants to add any, you can send them to us in the chat or in the Q&A. The first one I have is, so I've been using Excel. Is that still a possibility with Intacct?
Yes, but not with, so this would be for somebody, let me give an example. So if you're somebody using like Sage 100 or Sage 100 or Sage 500 or something along the lines of that, they use a report writer called Sage Intelligence, right? And that is an Excel-based report writer. So that would not be available, but there are other products that you can add on that are similar to that. Like Belixio, for instance, is a financial report writer. That is a Excel-based financial report writer that you can add on. It would be an additional product that you have to add on, but there are Excel-based financial report writers that can be added on if you don't like the interface of what we just kind of went over, or you wanted a more Excel-based interface. There are options out there.
All right. The other question I have is there any sort of training available?
There is training available. there's a couple different trainings available. There is, if as part of your subscription, you have access to the Sage Intacct Learning membership, then through that, as part of that subscription to that, learning membership, you have the ability of kind of doing some hands-on training on the financial report writer. And what it'll do as part of the training is you'll have your own instance of Sage Intacct that's simply used for the training. That's only available. It's usually available for like 2 or 3 weeks while you're doing the training, but you can walk through the training class hands-on using that instance of Sage Intacct out there to kind of do some training on the financial report writer on your own at your own pace whenever you want to do it. That's one option available. Of course, we can also do training for you guys as well, where we do just training right on the product, going a lot more in depth, kind of what we just did today. We can help you guys get started on your reports as well. We'll do that with a lot of clients where we'll do the training while we're writing one of the reports that they want to write. So we're doing training at the same time that we're writing one of the reports. So it accomplishes two things. It does training for the end users so they know how to use the product, but they're also getting a deliverable as part of that training that we do because we're writing one of their reports as part of the training and walking through that, and creating that report as part of the training. So that's some different options available for training out there.
All right. I don't think any other questions have come in. I'm not seeing any. Do you see any in your chat? I don't know if they sent them directly to you.
I do not see anything out there in the chat, no.
Okay. Then I think that's everything.
Okay. Well, I want to thank everybody for attending the session today. If you have any questions, just reach out to us. There's my email address, Brett's email address. We also have a Cincy@martinandassociates.com. If you have, somebody besides myself or Brett that you work with at Martin and Associates, and you'd rather reach out to them to start the conversation on, Sage Intacct, the financial report writer, whatever related to Sage Intacct, reach out. We'll be happy to talk to you guys further. And again, thanks for taking the time out to kind of attend. And we look forward to talking to you guys in the future. Thanks, guys. Bye.